1% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get punked, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in they Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the hustlers quick to roll, the gangsters don't move, whatever click you choose.
Say what's cracking, YouTube? It's your boy 16 to life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down. Now, for those of y'all that's new to my page, in 1994, I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years plus life, and I served 24 years straight in the California prison system. Yeah, that's me gassing on that intro. And if you want to get that song, tap in, hit me up on my email, 16tolifemusic@gmail.com, and I'm going to give you the information on how to get it. Now, let's hop into this video. So today, I'm going to be reacting to a YouTube channel called Blood on the Razor Wire. Now, for the longest, cats have been hitting me up telling me to react to some of these federal prison stories, to talk about some of these federal prison stories, so on and so forth. And today we doing just that. So let's get into it.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Blood on the Razor Wire TV, where you already know we bring it to you real and we bring it to you raw. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share the video. Make sure you leave a comment. I promise you're going to learn something today. So I know you've seen the thumbnail and you're like, damn, two of them dudes, what the hell was going on? I can tell you from personal experience, because I spent some time there at USP Pollock, one of the most dangerous prisons in the country, hands down. No question about it. About a month and a half ago, the DC dudes got into it with the Muslims, right? And you see a lot of DC dudes that are Muslim. So sometimes it's like, wow, what side are they going to pick, right? And I've seen people in that situation. There was a kid named Bush Boogie. Any DC dudes watching, you probably know who he is. He was originally from Brooklyn, but went to DC, ended up with a whole bunch of time out of there. And there were times when he was like, you know, hey, I got to choose when I'm going to choose. And one of the kids that ends up getting killed, man, I spent some time with him. I sent a picture of him over to my boy Dog that I had interviewed. I said, yo, remember this dude? He's like, yeah, man, it's Mario. What's up with him, man? Did he get out? I'm like, yeah, he got out, man, but he got out the wrong way. His blood was left on the razor wire. So anyway, DC gets into it with the Muslims. They start beefing. And, you know, I got some sources over there. Some of the staff hit me up. Some of the prisoners hit me up.
And, you know, that's a cold situation, like what he was just talking about, when you are originally from one faction, whether it's a city, whether it's a Crip gang, a Blood gang, you go to prison, and after some time, you may convert to being a Muslim. And then later on, because for those who don't know, the Muslims also push as a collective in prison, right? And then later on, if the Muslims happen to get into it with the former collective you used to run with, then it's kind of like you stuck with a decision. You know, I used to be a Crip, now I'm a Muslim. Who do I ride with? And so before a lot of that even happens and transpires, a lot of times your homies, your former homies, if you were a Crip or a Blood or from wherever, they will come to you and they will get that established. Okay, homie, yo, we see you hanging with the Muslims lately. You've been doing this, you know. Let us know where you stand, homie. So in the event something jump off, we know who's going to have your back and we know who you're riding with. And so it's ultimately up to that individual to make his own decision.
And they beef. A bunch of people end up in the hospital. Nobody dies. The compound goes on lockdown. They're locked down. They come off. I think 3-4 weeks later, they come off a lockdown. Might have been a little longer than that. They come off the lockdown. And when you come off lockdown in federal prison, everybody's running for that phone. You want a phone, you want a shower. And then if you got time, you might hit your family up on that Core Links. But if you don't, you're going to grab something to eat, maybe a soda or something from the store, man. And then you get locked back in, right? Sometimes they lock you back down and let you out for a couple of hours until things start to calm down. They start watching people. Just kind of how it works in federal prison. But anyway, dudes come out. There's always beef, man. Always beef over a telephone. The lines are long. People are trying to get a hold of their people, trying to call their mother, trying to call their kids. And from what I heard from a reliable source, a couple of them, Mario gets into it with a Crip kid from, I believe, the Midwest. And I also heard that this kid just gave back a bunch of his time. He was waiting to go back to court, I believe. They get into it over the phone. And, Mario was a really good dude, man. And the DC dudes will tell you, man, we ain't got no shot caller. But wherever you go, there's always like elders in the DC car, dudes that you can talk to, dudes that you can deal with. When there's a real issue, those are the dudes that are going to speak up. And, and a lot of the young homies get in line when people like Miyamai or Love or Mario are like, yo, this is what it is.
And now, with my page, I often will have individuals who are watching from outside of the United States, and then everybody who watches from inside the United States is not necessarily knowledgeable about prison or have been to prison. So when it comes to the United States federal system, the federal prison system, Washington, D.C. is not a state. And so unlike the other 50 states, Washington, D.C. does not have its own state prison system. So if you happen to get charged with a serious felony in Washington, more than likely, if you are convicted, you will be sent to the federal prison system, even though it may have been a state crime, or at least it could have been a state crime in other states. So once again, Washington does not have a state system. So you will hear of a lot of individuals from Washington, District of Columbia being in the federal system, and that's why.
And, we had an issue before. And, Mario was one of the people that kind of like took care of it, made sure it didn't go too far. We had a little beef where one of the DC dudes snatched the stamps from my boy Dog. We had a poker table over there. He took off with them. They eventually got some of that money back, and they sent the kid up top because they knew he was wrong. A lot of people talk shit about DC dudes, but there are a lot of good men from DC. And those dudes, like the people I just mentioned, Mario and Love and Miyamai, all them cats, they were the type of dudes that respected men. Men respect men.
Now, to my understanding, because I have never done time in the federal system, but all Crips do not hang together. You'll have the California Crips, you may have the Midwest Crips, and Crips from other areas, so it's broken down into cars, once again, somewhat similar to the California system, but this time, to my understanding, it's by what state you happen to be from. Sometimes some individuals come in and they may not even push Crip or Blood. Maybe they'll just hang with their state, maybe they'll just hang with the state that they're from. So it's somewhat similar to the California system, but still it's different.
So anyway, they get in this beef over the telephone, and Mario puts his hands on the kid, man. Puts his hands on the Crip kid, and I heard he smashed him, beat him up a little bit. And Mario was known for that, Any DC dudes watching that know Mario, anybody that's been in prison with him, he put that knockout on you at times. Put your lights out. He's a big dude, man. And he didn't play no games. So he ends up beating up the kid. The kid comes back, gets a knife, gets the up on him, stabs Mario, and Mario dies. He lost his life. Blood on the razor wire right there. Gone. Forever gone. And Mario was in prison, and I want this to be a teachable moment, right? Mario was in prison for something that I always say, man, if it ain't worth killing you over, it ain't worth arguing over, right?
And before he gets into that, some people may not be familiar with the terminology that he used in reference to the dude who he's calling the kid who stabbed Mario. Earlier, he had stated that the kid had just gave a bunch of his time back. So what he's saying is that kid had obviously put in an appeal, and he had whatever time he was sentenced to, he had a lot of it taken off for something improper that happened in the trial, or maybe he was sentenced improper or whatever it was. So he also was waiting to now go back and get a lot of time taken off his sentence, and in turn he gets beat up and he catches a murder charge, which more than likely will have him in the feds for the rest of his life.
And I can read a little bit of this for you. At the January 4th, 1993 hearing on this motion, Detective Jerome Siddick testified. On November 15th, 1991, He had been called to investigate a homicide at 1319 Park Road. He arrived on the scene at about 6:30 or 6:35 p.m. and remained there for approximately 1 hour to 1 hour and 15 minutes. According to Detective Siddick, witnesses at the scene said that at about 6:15 p.m., a man had accused people on the block of stealing his bicycle and had threatened to shoot up all of Park Road until he got the bicycle back. The man brandished what witnesses believed to be a 9mm handgun and then began to fire randomly into passing vehicles on Park Road. Next, he walked over to Renee Best, who was seated on the front step of 1319 Park Road, and fired 2 rounds at Best, striking and killing him. This was an unusual shooting, Siddick said, because Best offered no resistance. Best was a neighborhood alcoholic who bothered absolutely nobody and could not flee the scene that day because he was intoxicated and may have been passed out from his intoxicated level. After the shooting, the shooter continued to make threats as he left the scene, heading south on 13th Street.
Now, a lot of times, you hear terms that are used inappropriately or at the wrong time, and the term I'm talking about is crashed out. Now this right here, this is a crash out, man. This dude done crashed out because somebody stole his bike, and even if his bike was stole, the whole entire block didn't steal his bike. I don't think the whole entire block was in concert or went in cahoots to steal one bicycle. So this is crazy, man. This dude shoots up the whole block over a bicycle, winds up going to the feds because he's talking about Mario. Winds up going to the feds, and then I don't know how long he stayed in the feds, but ultimately he was killed in the feds. And he would not have been there if he had not crashed out over that bicycle.
Think about that, man. Over a bicycle. Bicycle gets stolen when we're young. We make young decisions, right? We make erratic decisions. So over a bicycle, man. This man ended up going to prison. I think he spent from 1991 to 2022 where he dies. Man, this man spent, 30 years in prison? 30 years in prison because someone stole his bike. And he's just like, yo, I'm about to take it out on, I'm not playing no games. And when you talk about DC dudes, young DC dudes being wild, I guess Mario was a wild dude. But let's talk a little bit more about him. Let's talk about Pollock. I have been taught life lessons by men doing life sentences. I've been a victim, and I've been an assailant. Back in the mid-2000s, USP Pollock was like being in Vietnam. There were more than a dozen murders in 18 months. And they averaged dozens of stabbings a month. Everything happens here. Once upon a time, 2 convicts attacking a third in the middle of the softball field. One had a lock on a belt. The other was brandishing the weapon of choice of all prisoners, a bone crusher.
Now that's crazy. Earlier he said it was more than 18 killings in 12 months. Or was it more than 12 killings in 18 months? Whatever it was, that's a hell of a lot of killing.
When the SEALs ran to break it up, the attackers shifted their attention from their mark to his saviors. This happens often behind these walls of gloom. On another occasion, the prisoner had wanted to do a food strike. The prisoners came together and said, you know what? We're going against the administration. They were eventually locked down. And once they were locked down, the prisoners ordered everybody not to take their brown paper bags that had our lunch in them. One of the white prisoners had no food in his cell, so he took his bag when it was thrust into his food slot. He accepted it gladly. He ate his bologna and cheese sandwiches and then his apple. Little did he know it would be the last one he would ever eat. Once the doors were unlocked, he was beat by 2 other prisoners for violating both convict code and the order. With only a few months left on his sentence, his blood would be left here on the razor wire. USP Pollock is a place where many prisoners do not want to go. Many, when they hear that this place will be their destination, shaking their prison-issued Jackie Chans. Once inside R&D, some choose to check in. Others choose to enter the halls of desperation. I once seen a man lay on the floor in the holding cell and refuse to come out when the cops called his name. Eventually, they would drag him from the cell by his hands and feet as he screamed and yelled like a caught zebra on the African plains in distress. On that same day, I would watch 4 or 5 young Texas syndicate gang members beat an old man when they discovered he was a paisa. Just seconds before that beating began, another paisa would walk out of the cell into the hands of the police, letting them know that he was not safe here. The old man was left to fend for himself. The young paisa recognized that he was in the waters with sharks. Even escapes happen here. On April 5th, 2006, Richard Lee McNary escaped from USP Pollock. He was working in Unicor, where he repaired old torn mailbags. He held this position for several months, during which time he plotted his escape. He would escape by constructing an escape pod, which included a breathing tube and burying it under a pile of outgoing mailbags. At approximately 9:45 a.m., prison staff placed the mailbags on a pallet, transported it to a nearby warehouse outside the prison's perimeter fence, and went for lunch. While they were enjoying their lunch, McNair would then cut himself out of the pod and escape at 11 o'clock a.m. He had already knew that count time was at 4 and that no one would notice that he was gone until then, giving him plenty of time to run.
Now, you know, that's crazy right there, man. I honestly have to say that I believe at some point in time, anybody who is locked up in prison, at least at some point in time when you are sentenced to a significant amount of time, or even what you may consider a significant amount of time, I believe we all have dreamt of escaping or thought about escaping if we had the opportunity, man. So even though, you know, I no longer live that life, I'm not gonna lie, man. It's a small part of me that always likes to hear and root for the person who has escaped from prison, as long as he doesn't get out and hurt people in his attempt to escape. But, you know, there's a side of me that just loves to root for an individual who can come up with a plan, who can come up with the ingenuity to get his way up out of prison.
Run, Forrest, run. After a year-long manhunt, he would be captured in New Brunswick, Canada. He had been highlighted on America's Most Wanted on numerous occasions. Since McNair had previously escaped from a county jail and a state prison in North Dakota, once he was caught, they classified him as a high escape risk and transferred him to the U.S. Penitentiary, Florence, ADX. The federal supermax prison in Colorado, which we all know can become a mental torture chamber for those prison officials determined need the tightest controls. On November 2007, William Anthony Pollock was stabbed to death with a shank during an altercation with another prisoner, identified as Sean Wayne Williams. Williams had crafted the shank from a part of a cell locker. Williams was serving a 96-month sentence for being a felon in possession of a firearm, was convicted of voluntary manslaughter in 2009, and sentenced to an additional 15 years in prison for the prison killing. Williams is currently incarcerated at USP Big Sandy. He's scheduled to walk out on January 21st, 2023. Prisoner Stephen Prater was serving a 51-month sentence for being a felon in possession of a firearm. He too was fatally injured at USP Pollock during a fight on June 24th, 2010. On January 18, 2010, another prisoner, Carlton Coltron, was stabbed to death by another prisoner. Coltron's mother said that her son, who was serving a sentence for bank robbery, told her several days before that there were running disputes between gangs of inmates from Louisiana and the Washington, D.C. area. The murders of Prater and Coltron remain under investigation for some time, but their killers too were captured and taken to court. There have been many killings here, including more from D.C. One involved Eddie Branch, who was incarcerated at USP Pollock. A D.C. inmate attacked a white inmate, and the white inmate ended up dying. Branch is attacked by the D.C. inmate upon entering the unit, but is able to get to his cell in a second cell to get 2 weapons. Branch and the D.C. inmate square off in the middle of the unit, and we put this video out so you can see it. Branch backs the D.C. guy into a shower, and he gets the upper hand. Branch then stabs the D.C. inmate in the neck and multiple other places in the torso, and the D.C. inmate falls to the ground just outside the shower. In the surveillance video, you can see him lying in a pool of his own blood. He, too, would leave his blood on the razor wire. A black D.C. prisoner stopped the assault by swinging a mop handle at Branch. But it was too late. Oh, far too late. At the time staff arrive and escort Branch out of the unit, the D.C. inmate bleeds out right there on the floor, just outside the shower. Branch would eventually be transferred to the ADX. He was convicted of manslaughter. Once leaving ADX, he would go to USP Terre Haute. When he gets there, the DC inmates, they recognize him. Yo, that's that white dude right there. That's the dude that killed the homie. And they tell the other white prisoners, yo, dude's got to go. You got to send him up top or else. And the white prisoners respond, look, your dude killed one of our dudes. He went after him and he killed him too. So we're even. Everything's over with. They said, no, it's not over with. Everybody straps up with knives. They're on the yard. The cops recognize it. They lock everybody up.
Now, even in a situation like that, and to my understanding, the federal prison system is extremely different and more violent than the state system, especially when you're dealing with USPs, the United States prisons. See, they have USPs, which are the upper echelon of violence and the highest security, and then they have lower level prisons. But at these USPs, to my understanding, it's extremely violent. So even though this individual killed somebody because one of his own was killed, whenever he moved on and went to the next pen that he went to, when he was recognized, individuals still wanted retribution, even though he, according to prison protocol, he reacted correctly, right? But they're never satisfied with a situation like that when you take the life of somebody else that they're close to, because individuals definitely want get back. And so that was the situation right there.
All the DC inmates are transferred to USP Marion at the time. And all the other prisoners, all the white prisoners, go to USP Leavenworth. The number 1 and number 2 guys from the white group told the warden when given an ultimatum, they will always choose the or else option to maintain respect. And the killing never stops. Mark Harris, aka Mario, he too left his blood on the razor wire. Staff at the facility found Mark B. Harris, 55, to be unresponsive around 9 a.m. on July 12th. This was Mario. Emergency medical services were requested and Harris was transported to a local hospital for life-threatening injuries. He was pronounced dead by hospital staff. Then again on July 30th, 2022, just before 3 o'clock p.m., they were going at it again. They had been off lockdown for 5 or 6 days at USP Pollock. And then again, it was the DC guys fighting the Crip dudes and some of their homeboys. And on that fateful day, at approximately 3 o'clock p.m., the stabbing started. And that's where another DC prisoner, Lionel Stoddard, was transferred to a local hospital for life-threatening injuries after he too was stabbed. He was pronounced deceased by hospital staff. A second and third inmate were medically assessed and treated at the facility, while a fourth inmate was transported to a local hospital for further medical assessment and treatment. Mr. Stoddard was only 39 years old when he left his blood on the razor wire, sentenced out of DC to 732 months for conspiracy to participate in a racketeering influence corrupt organization, conspiracy to commit offenses against the United States, armed bank robbery, aiding and abetting, using a firearm during a crime of violence, unlawful possession of a firearm by a person convicted of a crime, and attempted possession with intent to distribute cocaine. He had been in custody at USP Pollock since February 12, 2021. USP Pollock, a house of horrors, a dangerous place. This man had only been there a little more than a year. 39 years old, his life is forever gone. Blood left on the razor wire. And that's USP Pollock.
Now that's crazy, you know. The dude was only in prison for a year before he lost his life, And it's crazy because when you go to these prisons, feds, states, whatever it is, you never know what's gonna happen, right? And so I've been getting a lot of requests to react to some of these federal prison stories, to get into some of these federal prison stories, and I always kind of wanted to, because when I was incarcerated myself, I read a lot about the federal prison system and some of these famous federal prisoners that you'll hear me talk about. I was a little reluctant because I haven't served any federal time, but from time to time I get requests to get into some of this stuff, right? And so as I do, you will definitely hear a lot about an organization or a group of individuals that's known as the DC Blacks, which are, black prisoners from Washington, D.C. Like I mentioned earlier, they are prevalent in these prisons, and they have a strong prison presence and a strong prison reputation, to my understanding. Anyway, you already know what it is. It's your boy 16 to life. Resume normal program.